essentials to those needing assistance. Brisbane Recovery Services Centre Moonya is a detoxification and long-term rehabilitation program for people with drug, alcohol and gambling addictions. The annual Red Shield Appeal is the funding arm of the extensive and often expensive social services of the Salvation Army in Queensland. Your tax-deductible donation and voluntary assistance to the Red Shield Appeal is appreciated by both the Salvos and the 1.5 million Australians who are helped each year. Thank God for the Salvos.
Okay, that just expanded a little bit, the prison services, all that sort of stuff, court services. We also have a rural chaplaincy service, so they go out to the outback where farmers are lonely, a lot of depression in the outback. We run a helicopter service out of Rockhampton, which is new, because when the floods came we found that the light aircraft couldn't get out to all of the places, so the Army's invested in a helicopter that they run out of Rockhampton. They're looking for a second one to run out of Mount Isa, which really helps in those sorts of areas. So there's lots of things which I guess stretches our resources a bit from time to time, but you can always be assured that the Army is committed to continuing to deliver those. Has anybody got any questions? I'm mindful of time. Julie?
How are the Salvos predominantly funded?
Predominantly funded. The Red Shield Appeal.
That's the majority?
Well, there's a number of issues. The Red Shield Appeal, bequests and bequeaths, so people leave money in their will. We get some government funding, but we have to compete for that against all the other providers. The unemployment, Employment Plus, competes with Serena Russo's and everybody else in the world to provide those services. But it's mainly through bequests, Red Shield Appeal. Interestingly, in America, which I go to quite often, most of you know my son lives over there, the Salvation Army is not known as a church as much. They're really known as a service provider, and very well known. Jane and I packed Christmas presents and food parcels in Kansas City one year, and we sent out 30,000 packages. The Army in America caters to 32 million people, receive some form of assistance from the Army. The founder of McDonald's, which is the Kroc family, K-R-O-C, he died. When his third wife passed away, they bequeathed $1.6 billion to the Salvation Army's work in North America. That just gives you an example. In Dallas, there's a man called Jerry Jones who has just built the Dallas football stadium. Cost him $1.2 billion. He's the owner of it. He built it. Around the whole outside of the playing field where the Dallas Cowboys play, and lots of other people entertain there, U2 and all that sort of stuff. Right around the outside, at ground level, the hoarding that goes around below the seats, the most expensive advertising signs you could see in the world. There are 12 major Salvation Army Red Shield shields around that. And I can't tell you how much he gives to the Army. I have no idea. It's anonymous. We don't know. But I can tell you it is significant. So that's how most of us... And the same happens in Australia. A little thing it's probably a bit more public knowledge now. One year, the Red Shield Appeal, going back some time ago, probably back 91, when we had another major financial hiccup in Australia. Some of you won't remember it, some of you will. We were $3 million short on the Red Shield Appeal, Australia-wide. And that was announced on the Friday, whenever it was. On the Monday morning, someone opening the mail in the Salvation Army headquarters in Sydney turned up a cheque for $3 million, drawn on an anonymous trust. I guess the myth or the theory goes it was actually written by Kerry Packer. So although you hear about all these bad stories about Kerry Packer, quietly away, he was a very, very generous man. I think that stemmed from how he was treated as a child by his family. He was beaten, he was sat in the corner, he was told he was worthless, he was told he was a dunce. And he turned to the Salvos for some help at some part in his life, and he never forgot it. His major issue was he was dyslexic, and his father wouldn't recognise it. Anyway, there's lots of little stories I could talk about, and I've taken enough time. We've got other things to do in the meeting. Is there any other questions? Yeah.
The 43-week drug rehabilitation program, who pays for that and how much it cost?
It costs a lot more than we get paid for it. We get some government funding, not a lot. All of the clients, although it's not discriminated too harshly, most of them are on Centrelink benefits, and we take 80% of that payment, and the other 20% of their Centrelink payment we set up a bank account, we bank it and we keep it for them, because if they get access to money while they're under that program, it's very difficult. They run like a little bank account at the centre, so if they want to buy some sweets or other bits and pieces, most of them smoke, they want to buy some cigarettes at some point in time, they can access that money, but 80% of their Centrelink gets paid to the Army. And that's more them taking some responsibility for their own treatment as well. The program is totally modelled on the AA program, the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. The major difference is we have a spiritual element in the treatment and in the program. We have a recovery service, chapel service every Tuesday night that they all must attend, and all their families can come and attend if they're still in touch with them. It's a very non-threatening, very low-key environment. It's not a heavy, belch over the head Christian thing. It's a lot of people get up and give their testimonies, and at that time we encourage a lot of school groups to come to that chapel service. A lot of the private schools do it, who bring year 11, 12s along so they can see what is happening in a drug centre, in a non-threatening environment. The Broncos football team comes regularly, particularly their development squad, very heavily supported by the Broncos. Broncos have a chaplain to the Broncos, who is a fellow called Bill Hunter, who is also a Salvationist, and he runs the Centenary Salvation out at Centenary and in Western Brisbane. He is a chaplain to the Broncos. I don't know whether other rugby league clubs have chaplains. I've never inquired, but the Broncos do, and hopefully that's been impacted on the general behaviour of the Broncos outside of football, and we don't seem to see too many of those guys getting into much trouble at the moment. So yeah, that sort of things.
I'll just make an observation if I can. I remember that my own experience in Vietnam, soldiers worried about their families at home, didn't want to use the army welfare system because somebody in an army uniform turning up at somebody's house to inquire how they were going, they're just terrified it was really bad news. And the Salvos had their own informal network, worked really well. Somebody could talk to the Salvos, and they would go and talk to the families and then relay the messages back, and it was a very, very effective way. People who were just a bit worried about their families at home. So they did fantastic work. Really, they really, really highly respected and admired.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Anything else? No. I'll just leave you with one little thought. People who, I guess a lot of people say they're Christians, and you probably are in a certain way. It worries me that Australia is slipping away from being a Christian country. But people struggle sometimes with Christians who forgive people for things they've done, whatever the thing might be. The best way I can explain the way I deal with it, and the way a lot of Army people deal with it, particularly from the drug and alcohol recovery service, where lots of bad things have happened to these people, is you never forgive the action of what happened to you. What you are doing is you're forgiving up the right to get even. And if you just think about that, if you always